Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the hidden world of the filthy rich during Regency England, a time of glittering ballrooms, extravagant feasts, secret scandals, and lives so luxurious that ordinary people could barely imagine them. The year is 1815. London is glowing beneath thousands of candle lights, and the streets outside the grand mansions are filled with mud, rain, and exhausted workers dragging carts through the darkness. But behind the enormous doors of aristocratic estates, another world exists entirely, a world of silk gloves, golden chandeliers, endless wine, and people who never worried about money for even a single second of their lives. Every morning, wealthy noblemen woke up not to alarm clocks or hard labor, but to servants quietly opening curtains to let sunlight into massive bedrooms decorated with imported carpets and hand-carved furniture. Some aristocrats had so many servants that they barely needed to move at all. A servant might help them get dressed. Another would prepare breakfast. Another would polish shoes. And another would carry letters across the city. Breakfast itself was already more luxurious than what many poor families could eat in several days. Fresh bread, eggs, butter, tea imported from Asia, sweet jams, roasted meats, and expensive desserts covered long dining tables. While the rich leisurely discussed politics and gossip, many ordinary citizens outside struggled to afford bread. Luxury came with strange expectations. High society in Regency England was obsessed with appearances. Noble women spent hours preparing their hair, tightening painful corsets, and choosing dresses designed to display wealth and status. Looking elegant was not simply fashion, it was social survival. A single embarrassing rumor could destroy a family's reputation overnight. At night, the elite gathered in enormous ballrooms illuminated by hundreds of candles. Music filled the air while couples danced complicated routines that had to be learned perfectly. One wrong step could become the subject of gossip for weeks. These parties were not just entertainment. They were opportunities to secure powerful marriages, political alliances, and financial connections. Many young women were introduced into society almost like products being displayed for wealthy bachelors. Families desperately hoped their daughters would marry into even greater wealth or titles. Love was often less important than status. A successful marriage could elevate an entire family for generations. Meanwhile, gambling quietly consumed the aristocracy. Hidden behind elegant smiles and polite conversation were dangerous addictions. Noblemen often lost shocking amounts of money in a single evening playing cards. Some gambled away entire fortunes, estates, and inheritances while pretending everything was perfectly under control. Alcohol flowed endlessly during these gatherings. Expensive wines, brandy, and champagne were symbols of sophistication. But history was already beginning to change. Beneath the glittering dresses and luxurious palaces, cracks were forming inside Regency society. The rich continued hosting extravagant parties while thousands of ordinary people across England struggled to survive rising food prices, unemployment, and terrible living conditions. In the crowded streets of London, poor families often lived inside tiny, dirty rooms with barely enough food to survive the winter. Children worked exhausting jobs in factories and chimneys while aristocrats spent fortunes on jewelry, gambling, and entertainment. Many wealthy families rarely even saw the suffering outside their carriage windows. When noblemen traveled through the city, Servants cleared the way while elegant horses pulled beautifully, decorated carriages across muddy roads. Some aristocrats considered poor people lazy or inferior, believing poverty was simply a result of bad character instead of cruel social systems. Yet anger among the lower classes slowly continued growing. Inside aristocratic homes, life was not always as perfect as it appeared. Marriages arranged for status rather than love often became cold and miserable. Husbands and wives sometimes lived almost separate lives inside the same mansion. Affairs and secret romances became common among the upper class. Though society publicly pretended morality was extremely important, scandalous rumors spread rapidly through dinner parties and private clubs. A single affair exposed to the public could ruin reputations forever. The pressure placed upon women was especially brutal. Young noblewomen were expected to remain elegant, obedient, and charming at all times. They had very little freedom to choose their own futures. Many spent years preparing for marriage while being constantly judged on beauty, manners, and family connections. Even their conversations during social events were carefully controlled. Meanwhile, wealthy men enjoyed far greater freedom and often escaped punishment for behavior that would destroy a woman's reputation instantly. Fashion itself could become physically painful. Corsets squeezed women's bodies tightly for hours every single day, making breathing difficult. Heavy dresses, uncomfortable shoes, and elaborate hairstyles turned simple movement into exhausting work. Yet suffering quietly was considered a sign of refinement and class. As years passed, industrialization slowly transformed England. Factories expanded, cities grew larger, and new ideas about equality and rights began spreading through society. The old aristocratic world still looked powerful on the surface, but change was becoming impossible to stop. The extravagant lifestyle of Regency England would eventually fade, leaving behind stories of incredible wealth, shocking inequality, and a society obsessed with appearance above all else. Despite the growing tensions in society, the aristocracy of Regency England refused to slow down their extravagant lifestyle. Grand country estates continued, hosting luxurious hunting parties where wealthy gentlemen rode across massive lands, chasing foxes for entertainment. Expensive horses, tailored riding coats, and elegant weapons became symbols of power and prestige. For the rich, even sports were opportunities to display status. Meanwhile, ordinary workers often spent entire days performing dangerous labor simply to earn enough money for bread and coal. Inside the mansions of the elite, dinner parties became more elaborate every year. Wealthy families competed to impress guests with exotic foods imported from distant parts of the world. Pineapples, rare wines, spices, and expensive desserts decorated enormous tables illuminated by candlelight. Servants moved silently between guests, carefully pouring drinks and replacing plates while pretending to be invisible. The richer the host appeared, the greater their social influence became. Reputation meant everything in Regency society. But beneath the polished surface Many aristocrats were drowning in debt. Maintaining luxurious lifestyles required enormous amounts of money. Some noble families secretly borrowed huge sums just to continue appearing wealthy in public. A family could own a massive estate, yet still face financial ruin behind closed doors. Gambling addictions made the situation even worse. Certain men lost fortunes in a single night inside exclusive gentlemen's clubs hidden within London. Yet pride prevented many from admitting failure. For servants, life remained exhausting and unforgiving. Maids woke before sunrise to light fireplaces, prepare washing water, and clean endless hallways before the wealthy residents even opened their eyes. Cooks worked in dangerously hot kitchens for countless hours every day. Footmen stood motionless during formal events no matter how tired they felt. One mistake could lead to immediate dismissal, leaving workers homeless with nowhere else to go. Even children born into aristocratic families experienced strict control. Young boys were trained to become powerful gentlemen, while girls learned music, dancing, and social etiquette from an early age. Everything revolved around preserving family honor and social position. Emotions were often hidden beneath layers of politeness and formal behavior. As the Regency era slowly approached its end, England itself was changing rapidly. Industrial factories continued expanding across the country, bringing both opportunity and suffering. New wealth from business and trade began challenging the old power of traditional aristocrats. Society was no longer controlled entirely by ancient noble families. The glittering world of Regency England still looked magnificent from the outside, but underneath the luxury, fear, inequality, and instability continued growing stronger with every passing year. By the early 19th century, the obsession with status in Regency England had reached extraordinary levels. Every detail of aristocratic life became a performance designed to display elegance, power, and superiority. Wealthy families carefully watched each other, constantly comparing clothing, estates, marriages, and social connections. Even the smallest mistake during a public gathering could become humiliating gossip spread across London within days. In this world, appearance mattered, almost more than reality itself. Mourning, routines inside noble households were incredibly complex. Servants rushed through enormous corridors carrying hot water, fresh clothing, letters, and breakfast trays before sunrise. Aristocrats often spent hours preparing themselves before appearing in public. Men styled their hair carefully, polished expensive boots, and wore tailored coats made from luxurious fabrics. Women decorated themselves with jewelry, perfumes, gloves, and detailed hairstyles that sometimes required several servants working together. Looking wealthy was considered a responsibility, not simply a preference social. Visits became an important part of everyday life among the upper class. Wealthy ladies traveled between mansions in elegant carriages to exchange gossip, discuss marriages, and strengthen relationships with influential families. Invitations to exclusive events were highly valuable because they determined social status. Being ignored by powerful hosts could damage a family's reputation for years. Entire lives revolved around maintaining connections with the right people. Entertainment during the Regency era was often extravagant and excessive. Private concerts, theater performances, masquerade balls, and gambling nights filled aristocratic calendars. Some parties lasted until sunrise, while servants worked endlessly behind the scenes preparing food and cleaning enormous rooms. Expensive candles illuminated giant halls, while orchestras performed music for dancing couples dressed in silk and velvet. Yet beneath the beauty of these gatherings, many guests secretly competed against one another for influence and prestige. Outside the glamorous estates, however, England looked completely different. Industrial cities grew crowded and polluted as factories expanded rapidly. Across the country, poor families struggled through harsh winters without proper heating or clean water. Disease spread easily in overcrowded neighborhoods, while wealthy aristocrats remained protected inside luxurious homes far away from the suffering. The divide between rich and poor became impossible to ignore. At the same time, newspapers and writers slowly began criticizing the selfishness and excess of the aristocracy. More people started questioning whether noble families truly deserved such enormous privilege, while millions lived in misery. As Regency England moved deeper into the 19th century, the pressure to maintain wealth and status became even more intense among aristocratic families. Every public appearance was carefully planned. Noble women practiced elegant manners from childhood, learning how to walk, speak, dance, and even smile according to the strict expectations of high society. Young men were trained to appear confident, educated, and powerful, no matter what personal problems they secretly faced behind closed doors. In this world, weakness was dangerous because reputation controlled everything. A single scandal could destroy generations of carefully protected family honor. Wealthy families therefore lived in constant fear of embarrassment, gossip, and social humiliation. The luxurious estates of the aristocracy were designed to impress visitors. At every moment, massive gardens stretched across the countryside, decorated with fountains, statues, and exotic plants imported from distant countries. Inside the mansions, walls were covered with expensive paintings, while giant fireplaces warmed enormous rooms filled with silk curtains and carved furniture. Some estates were so large that servants needed several minutes simply to walk from one side of the building to another. Maintaining these properties required huge numbers of workers who cleaned endlessly from morning until night. Despite all their hard labor, servants were expected to remain invisible during formal events, speaking only when absolutely necessary. For the rich, travel itself became another symbol of status. Aristocrats visited fashionable seaside towns, luxury spas, and exclusive country estates where the elite gathered to socialize. Bath became famous for elegant parties and romantic meetings, attracting wealthy families hoping to strengthen their social position. During these journeys, servants packed enormous amounts of clothing, jewelry, and personal belongings because appearing fashionable in every situation remained extremely important. Even vacations became exhausting performances designed to protect reputation and prestige. Yet beneath the elegance of Regency society, many aristocrats secretly suffered from loneliness and emotional isolation. Formal behavior prevented genuine honesty between people. Marriages arranged for wealth or titles often lacked affection, leaving husbands and wives trapped inside cold relationships where appearances mattered more than happiness. Some aristocrats turned to gambling, alcohol, or secret affairs to escape boredom and emotional emptiness. Others became obsessed with spending money on luxury goods simply to feel important in a society that constantly judged personal worth by outward appearance. Meanwhile, ordinary people across England watched this extravagant lifestyle from a distance they could never cross. Workers spent long, exhausting days inside dangerous factories while noble families danced beneath golden chandeliers at midnight. As the Regency era continued, the obsession with elegance and social rank began shaping nearly every moment of aristocratic life. Wealthy families measured success not only through money, but through influence, connections, and the ability to impress others during public gatherings. Invitations to exclusive dinners and grand balls became symbols of power. Certain noble families were treated almost like celebrities, with people closely watching their clothing, marriages, and personal scandals. Rumors spread rapidly through drawing rooms and private clubs, turning society into a world where everyone constantly judged everyone else, even close. Friendships were sometimes built more on status than genuine trust. Inside aristocratic homes, servants lived under strict discipline. Bells installed throughout giant mansions allowed wealthy residents to summon workers instantly from distant rooms below the house. Cooks prepared enormous meals with military precision, while housekeepers carefully managed dozens of servants responsible for cleaning, laundry, fireplaces, and guest rooms. A perfectly organized household reflected the status of the family itself. If a dinner party failed or guests noticed poor service, embarrassment could damage a noble family's reputation across high society. Many aristocrats also became fascinated with collecting rare and expensive objects from around the world. Paintings, ancient artifacts, imported furniture, and exotic animals were displayed proudly inside luxurious estates. Wealthy travelers returned from Europe with souvenirs proving their sophistication and education. Owning beautiful objects became another competition among the elite, with families constantly attempting to outshine one another through displays of luxury and refinement. Some spent unbelievable amounts of money simply to appear more cultured than their rivals. Despite the glamour, life in Regency England could feel deeply restrictive for women. Noble women were expected to remain calm, graceful, and obedient in every situation. Open ambition or strong opinions were often criticized as improper behavior. Many women spent years trapped inside repetitive social routines, attending dinners, dances, and visits while having little control over their futures. Marriage remained the primary goal society expected from them, and failure to marry well could lead to humiliation or financial insecurity. Behind elegant smiles, countless women experienced frustration and loneliness they were never allowed to openly express at the same time. England itself was becoming louder, larger, and more industrialized. Factories filled the air with smoke, while crowded cities expanded rapidly beyond anything previous. Generations had imagined. New business owners and merchants slowly gained wealth powerful enough to challenge traditional aristocrats. The old noble families still controlled enormous estates and political influence, but the world around them was changing too quickly to stop. The world of Regency England depended heavily on appearances, and nowhere was this more visible than during the famous London social season. Every year, wealthy aristocratic families traveled to the capital to attend an endless cycle of dances, theater performances, political gatherings, and elegant dinners. The streets surrounding luxurious neighborhoods, filled with expensive carriages, while noble families competed to host the most impressive events of the season. Young women entering society for the first time were introduced at glamorous parties where powerful families searched for suitable marriages and valuable connections. These moments could shape an entire future within a single evening for aristocratic daughters. Beauty and manners were treated almost like currency. Girls spent years practicing piano, singing, dancing, and polite conversation because society expected them to appear perfect in every public setting. Mothers carefully supervised every interaction, hoping to secure wealthy husbands with important titles or political influence. Romantic love was often considered far less important than social advancement. A successful marriage could increase a family's power, while a disappointing one could become a source of shame, discussed for years. Among the elite, men within high society faced different pressures. Noblemen were expected to appear confident, educated, fashionable, and emotionally controlled at all times. Many spent enormous fortunes on tailored coats, luxury watches, riding horses, and gambling clubs simply to maintain their image among other aristocrats. Some became deeply trapped in debt while continuing to pretend everything was perfectly stable. Pride prevented many wealthy families from admitting financial problems, even when their fortunes slowly disappeared behind closed doors. Maintaining the illusion of wealth became more important than honesty itself. The grand estates, owned by aristocrats, were symbols of power that demanded constant maintenance. Large numbers of servants cleaned windows, polished silver, prepared meals, washed clothing, and managed fireplaces every day without rest. Kitchens operated almost non-stop before major gatherings, producing huge feasts designed to amaze wealthy guests. Servants often worked exhausting hours while remaining almost invisible during social events. Their entire purpose was to make aristocratic life appear effortless and elegant. Yet most workers received little recognition despite sacrificing their lives to support the luxuries surrounding them. Beyond the glittering world of the aristocracy, England continued changing rapidly. Factories expanded, trade increased, and crowded industrial cities grew larger each year. New forms of wealth created powerful businessmen who challenged traditional noble families for influence and respect at the same time. Ordinary workers increasingly questioned the fairness of a society where a tiny elite lived in enormous luxury while millions struggled through poverty. Although the aristocracy of Regency England appeared powerful and untouchable, many members of high society secretly feared the future. Across Europe, revolutions and political unrest had already shown what could happen when ordinary people became angry with extreme inequality. Wealthy English nobles watched these events carefully while continuing to protect their own luxurious world through tradition, influence, and strict social rules. Publicly, they projected confidence and elegance. Privately, some worried that the growing divide between rich and poor could eventually threaten the entire system that kept them privileged for generations. Inside London's elite clubs and private dining rooms, powerful men discussed politics, business, and international affairs while surrounded by expensive wine and candlelight. These clubs became important centers of influence where aristocrats strengthened alliances and protected their social status. Membership itself symbolized prestige. Ordinary citizens could never enter such places, no matter how intelligent or hardworking they were. Regency society remained deeply divided by class, and the upper class worked constantly to maintain those boundaries. Wealth alone was sometimes not enough. Family history, noble titles, and social connections mattered just as much as money. Fashion during the Regency era also reflected this obsession with superiority. Wealthy women changed outfits several times a day depending on the occasion. Morning dresses, walking dresses, evening gowns, riding clothes, and ball dresses all followed complicated social expectations. Men competed through elegant coats, polished boots, silk cravats, and expensive accessories imported from abroad. Entire industries profited from aristocratic vanity, producing luxury fabrics, perfumes, jewelry, and decorative items designed specifically for the elite. Looking fashionable became almost a full-time occupation for wealthy society. At grand balls, orchestras played for hours while noble guests danced beneath sparkling chandeliers late into the night. Yet these glamorous events often hid emotional tension beneath the surface. Rivalries between families, jealousy over marriages, financial stress, and secret affairs created endless drama within aristocratic circles. Some guests attended social gatherings not for enjoyment, but because absence itself could damage their reputation. To remain visible in society, was essential. Isolation from elite social life often meant losing influence and status completely. Meanwhile, servants continued carrying the enormous burden of maintaining aristocratic luxury. They cleaned muddy boots after hunting trips, repaired damaged clothing, prepared endless meals, and stayed awake long after midnight while wealthy guests celebrated upstairs. Servants witnessed the private reality behind noble families better than anyone else. As the final years of the Regency era approached, many aristocratic families struggled to preserve the illusion that their world would last forever. Grand estates still hosted magnificent celebrations filled with music, dancing, and candlelight. But beneath the luxury, uncertainty continued spreading through high society. Political reform movements gained support among ordinary citizens. Newspapers became more influential, and public criticism of the aristocracy slowly increased. The wealthy elite still controlled enormous power, yet people across England were beginning to question whether such extreme privilege should continue unchanged. The lives of noble children reflected the strict values of aristocratic society. From an early age, young boys were educated by private tutors who prepared them for politics, military service, or managing family estates. They learned languages, history, mathematics, and proper gentlemanly behavior while constantly being reminded that their family reputation must never be damaged. Girls were raised very differently. Their education focused heavily on music, drawing, dancing, embroidery, and polite conversation, because society expected them to become elegant wives capable of impressing wealthy husbands and guests. Personal dreams mattered less than fulfilling social expectations. Religion and morality were publicly treated as extremely important among the upper classes. Yet hypocrisy remained common throughout Regency society. Aristocrats often presented themselves as respectable and honorable while secretly engaging in affairs, gambling, and dishonest financial dealings behind closed doors. Public image mattered more than genuine virtue. As long as scandals remained hidden from society, many noble families continued pretending perfection existed inside their luxurious homes. Servants frequently knew the truth about these secret lives, but risked losing their positions if they spoke openly. Entertainment among the elite continued becoming more extravagant with every passing year. Private theaters, lavish gardens, horse races, and luxurious vacations filled aristocratic calendars. Some nobles became obsessed with collecting rare animals, priceless artwork, and exotic decorations from distant countries simply to display their wealth. Others spent fortunes redesigning their estates to follow changing fashion trends. The competition for prestige never truly ended because aristocrats constantly compared themselves to one another. Even within the wealthy class, there were endless struggles over influence, rank, and reputation. Outside aristocratic circles, however, the realities of industrial England grew increasingly harsh. Smoke from factories darkened the skies above expanding cities while overcrowded neighborhoods filled with poverty and disease. Workers faced exhausting schedules and dangerous conditions that wealthy nobles rarely experienced themselves. Even as Regency England slowly disappeared into history, the culture created by its aristocracy continued influencing society. For many years afterward, the image of elegant ballrooms, luxurious estates, and beautifully dressed nobles remained deeply fascinating to future generations. Writers, artists, and historians often remembered the period as an age of romance and sophistication. Yet behind the glamorous image existed a far more complicated reality shaped by inequality, pressure, and social control. For many aristocrats, maintaining status required constant performance and endless competition with others inside the elite world. Inheritance became one of the greatest concerns among noble families. Aristocratic estates, titles, and fortunes were carefully protected across generations because losing wealth meant losing influence and respect within society. Families without male heirs sometimes faced enormous anxiety about the future of their estates. Marriages were therefore often arranged strategically to preserve property and strengthen alliances between powerful families. Love could exist, but financial security and social advantage usually mattered far more. The future of entire bloodlines often depended upon decisions made during private negotiations between wealthy parents rather than the desires of young couples themselves. Daily life inside aristocratic households remained highly structured and formal. Meals followed strict etiquette, conversations obeyed social rules, and public behavior was carefully monitored at all times. Even laughter, posture, and tone of voice could influence how a person was judged within high society. Many aristocrats spent years mastering these unwritten rules because failing to behave correctly risked embarrassment or exclusion from elite social circles. Life among the upper class therefore became exhausting in ways outsiders rarely understood. Wealth brought comfort, but it also brought pressure to constantly appear perfect. For servants, however, the aristocratic lifestyle represented endless labor rather than elegance. Workers often sacrificed their health and personal freedom to support the luxury enjoyed by wealthy families. Some servants spent decades inside the same household, waking before dawn and sleeping only after. Every candle had been extinguished late at night. Despite their hard work, they remained socially invisible to the aristocrats they served. Yet servants quietly observed every secret hidden within noble households, witnessing arguments, scandals, debts, and emotional suffering hidden behind polite smiles. The AS England moved further into the 19th century. Political reforms and industrial growth gradually weakened the traditional dominance of the aristocracy. New wealthy businessmen challenged old noble families for influence while demands for social change became stronger across the country. The rigid social hierarchy of Regency England slowly lost its absolute control over society. By the time the Regency era finally came to an end, The aristocratic world that had once seemed eternal was already beginning to lose its grip on England. The grand balls still continued. Orchestras still played beneath glittering chandeliers, and wealthy nobles still traveled through London in luxurious carriages. But the atmosphere within high society had quietly changed. Fear about the future lingered beneath the elegance. Industrialization was transforming the country faster than many aristocrats could understand, and the old traditions that once guaranteed their dominance no longer felt completely secure. The younger generation of aristocrats entered adulthood during a period of uncertainty. Some continued embracing the extravagant lifestyles of their parents, spending enormous fortunes on gambling, fashion, hunting parties, and luxurious estates. Others, however, began recognizing that society itself was changing. New ideas about equality, education, and political reform spread rapidly through newspapers, books, and public discussions. The belief that noble blood alone guaranteed superiority slowly became harder to defend in a country where businessmen, industrialists, and merchants were becoming incredibly wealthy through trade and factories. Many old aristocratic estates also became financial burdens rather than symbols of strength. Maintaining giant mansions required huge numbers of servants, expensive repairs, and endless supplies of food, candles, clothing, and imported luxury goods. Some noble families secretly sold land or borrowed money simply to continue appearing wealthy in public. Pride prevented them from admitting weakness because social status depended heavily on maintaining the illusion of endless prosperity. Even families facing serious debt often continued hosting extravagant dinners and elegant social events to avoid humiliation. At the same time, servants remained trapped within strict social hierarchies that offered little freedom or recognition. A maid or footman could spend an entire lifetime serving one aristocratic household while never escaping poverty. Themselves, workers were expected to remain respectful, silent, and loyal regardless of exhaustion or mistreatment. Yet servants understood the hidden reality of aristocratic life better than anyone else. They witnessed private arguments, secret romances, financial panic, and emotional loneliness concealed beneath polished manners and luxurious clothing. The perfect image shown to society rarely reflected the truth behind closed doors. Public attitudes toward the aristocracy also slowly became more critical. During the years following the Regency period, writers and reformers increasingly exposed the enormous inequality separating rich and poor throughout England. While noble families attended glittering celebrations, millions of ordinary people struggled with overcrowded housing, dangerous factory conditions, and rising food prices. Long after the Regency era faded into history, people continued romanticizing the lives of the English aristocracy. Paintings, novels, and later films often focused on the elegance of candlelit ballrooms, luxurious gowns, and grand country estates surrounded by beautiful gardens. To outsiders, Regency England appeared almost magical, a world filled with romance, refinement, and endless sophistication. Yet the reality experienced by many people living during that time was far more complicated and far less perfect than the glamorous image remembered in history. For aristocrats themselves, daily life often revolved around maintaining control over appearance and reputation. Wealthy families carefully protected their public image because status influenced nearly every aspect of their existence. Friendships, marriages, political influence, and business opportunities all depended heavily on social perception. Even small scandals could spread rapidly through elite circles, damaging relationships built over generations. As a result, many nobles became trapped inside a world where genuine honesty was dangerous and emotional. Vulnerability was rarely allowed. The pressure placed upon aristocratic men could also become overwhelming. They were expected to manage estates, maintain family honor, participate in politics, and display confidence at all times regardless of personal struggles. Failure in business, gambling debts, or public embarrassment threatened not only individual reputations, but the standing of entire families. Some noblemen attempted escaping this pressure through alcohol, affairs, or reckless spending, creating even deeper financial and emotional problems behind closed doors. Women faced even stricter limitations. Noble women were expected to remain graceful, beautiful, obedient, and socially skilled throughout every stage of life. Marriage determined much of their future security and influence, leaving many dependent upon family decisions rather than personal choice. Even wealthy women with luxurious lifestyles often possessed little real freedom compared to the men around them. Society judged them constantly based on appearance, manners, and reputation. A rumor capable of damaging a woman's honor could destroy her future far more quickly than it would for a man. Meanwhile, the servants supporting aristocratic luxury continued, living extremely demanding lives. Entire households depended upon invisible armies of workers cleaning rooms, preparing meals, caring for horses, washing clothing, lighting candles, and maintaining giant estates every single day. Servants frequently worked from before sunrise until late at night while receiving little recognition from the wealthy families they served. Despite the enormous class divide, servants often understood the true, emotional reality of aristocratic life better than anyone else because they witnessed private fears hidden behind elegant public performances. As memories of Regency England continued spreading through literature and art, later generations often focused only on the beauty of aristocratic life while ignoring the harsh realities hidden beneath its polished surface. Grand estates glowing beneath candlelight, elegant dances lasting until sunrise, and luxurious clothing made from silk and velvet created an image of perfection that fascinated people long after the era ended. Yet for those actually living during the Regency period, daily life inside high society was often filled with stress, strict expectations, and constant social pressure. Wealth provided comfort, but it also created a world where every action was judged and every mistake carried consequences. The social hierarchy of Regency England remained incredibly rigid. Aristocrats believed strongly in the importance of class distinctions and carefully protected the boundaries separating nobles from ordinary citizens. Even speech, posture, and table manners revealed a person's social position. Wealthy families spent years teaching children how to behave correctly during formal dinners, public gatherings, and conversations with influential guests. Etiquette became almost a form of survival within elite society because failing to follow social rules risked embarrassment or exclusion. From important circles, reputation could determine an individual's entire future. Many aristocrats also feared loneliness despite living surrounded by people. Large estates often felt emotionally cold, with family relationships shaped more by duty than affection. Husbands and wives sometimes married for financial or political reasons while barely knowing each other personally. Children were frequently raised by governesses, tutors, and servants rather than parents themselves. Emotional distance became common inside noble households where appearances mattered more than open honesty. Behind luxurious walls, countless aristocrats quietly struggled with isolation and unhappiness, hidden beneath elegant smiles. At the same time, servants continued, carrying the enormous responsibility of preserving aristocratic comfort. Housemaids cleaned endless corridors and guest rooms while cooks prepared complicated meals requiring hours of exhausting labor. Stable workers cared for valuable horses, and footmen stood silently during formal events waiting to obey commands instantly. Servants lived according to strict rules where mistakes could lead to punishment or dismissal. Despite their lower social status, many workers possessed remarkable skill and discipline because maintaining aristocratic luxury demanded near constant effort from everyone behind the scenes. Outside the privileged world of the elite, England itself became increasingly industrialized and politically unstable. Crowded factory cities expanded rapidly while poverty, disease, and dangerous working conditions affected millions of ordinary people. Even after the Regency era ended, the influence of aristocratic culture continued shaping British society for decades. Many noble families remained determined to preserve their traditions, estates, and social authority despite the rapidly changing world around them. Huge country mansions still dominated the countryside, filled with portraits of ancestors, expensive libraries, and carefully protected treasures collected across generations. These estates symbolized centuries of inherited privilege, reminding visitors that aristocratic families considered themselves guardians of England's history and culture. Yet beneath this image of strength, many noble households quietly struggled with financial pressure and uncertainty about the future. Industrialization continued transforming the nation at an incredible speed. Railways expanded across the countryside, factories multiplied, and new industrial cities became centers of wealth and opportunity. Successful businessmen and factory owners gained fortunes rivaling those of ancient noble families. For the first time in generations, money earned through industry and trade began challenging wealth inherited through titles and land ownership. Some aristocrats adapted by investing in business and politics, while others refused to accept the changing reality surrounding them. The old world of Regency elegance slowly collided with a modern society driven increasingly by commerce, technology, and public reform. Inside aristocratic circles, however, social expectations remained extremely strict. Noble families still organized lavish dinners, hunting parties, and formal dances where appearance and etiquette controlled every interaction. Guests carefully observed one another's clothing, manners, and conversation skills, while hidden rivalries shaped relationships behind polite smiles. Even the placement of guests at dinner tables carried social meaning because rank and influence determined status within elite society. Every event became a subtle competition for prestige and recognition. Among the wealthy, women within aristocratic families continued facing intense pressure. Despite their luxurious surroundings, a noblewoman's reputation remained fragile, and society expected constant elegance, modesty, and obedience. Public embarrassment could destroy marriage opportunities and damage entire family reputations. Many women, therefore, learned to hide emotions beneath calm expressions and perfect manners. Although surrounded by beauty and comfort, they often possessed very little independence over important decisions affecting their lives. Wealth could provide luxury, but it did not necessarily provide freedom. Servants remained essential to maintaining the illusion of effortless aristocratic perfection. Behind every elegant dinner stood exhausted kitchen workers, preparing complicated meals for hours. Behind every spotless ballroom stood maids cleaning endlessly before guests arrived. As England entered a new age of industry and reform, the aristocrats who once dominated Regency society found themselves struggling to preserve the lifestyle that had defined their world for generations. The elegant traditions of grand balls, luxurious estates, and strict social etiquette still continued among the upper classes. But the confidence that once surrounded aristocratic power slowly began fading. Across the country, railways connected distant cities. Factories produced enormous wealth, and newspapers spread ideas faster than ever before. Ordinary citizens could now witness both the luxury of the rich and the suffering of the poor more clearly than previous generations had ever imagined. Many aristocrats attempted protecting their influence by becoming involved in politics, charity work, and public ceremonies designed to maintain respect from society. Wealthy noble families donated money to churches, sponsored local events, and publicly supported moral values in order to appear responsible and honorable. Yet critics increasingly argued that charity alone could never solve the deep inequality built into British society. While aristocrats enjoyed giant estates filled with servants and luxury goods, millions of workers still faced dangerous conditions, overcrowded housing, and exhausting labor inside industrial cities. The contrast between these worlds remained shocking. In aristocratic mansions, elaborate dinners featured imported wines, exotic fruits, expensive meats, and elegant desserts served on polished silver plates beneath glowing chandeliers. Servants moved quietly through enormous dining halls while wealthy guests discussed politics, fashion, and entertainment. At the very same time, poor families in industrial districts often survived on simple bread, weak soup, and whatever food they could afford after long days of exhausting work. The difference between rich and poor became one of the defining realities of 19th century England. Inside noble households, the pressure to maintain appearances never disappeared. Aristocratic families carefully protected their social image because public reputation remained connected to marriage opportunities, political influence, and financial stability. Scandals involving gambling, affairs, or debt could spread rapidly through elite circles and damage a family standing for years. As a result, many nobles became experts at hiding personal struggles behind elegant manners and carefully controlled behavior. Even emotional pain was often concealed beneath smiles and polite conversation. Servants continued carrying the enormous burden of sustaining aristocratic comfort. They woke before sunrise to light fires, prepare breakfast, clean rooms, polish silver, and organize clothing before wealthy residents even left their beds. During grand social events, servants sometimes worked nearly all night while guests danced and celebrated upstairs. And so, the world of Regency England slowly faded into history. The grand ballrooms eventually grew quiet. The candlelight disappeared from enormous mansions, and the elegant carriages that once rolled through London became memories of another age. Yet the stories of the aristocracy survived long after their golden era ended. People continued remembering the glittering dresses, luxurious estates, orchestras playing through the night, and nobles dancing beneath shining chandeliers as if their world would last forever. But behind all that beauty existed a far more fragile reality. The wealthy families of Regency England lived surrounded by luxury, yet many were trapped by endless pressure, fear of scandal, financial worries, and strict social expectations. Their lives appeared perfect from the outside, but beneath the polished manners and elegant smiles often hid loneliness, rivalry, and quiet unhappiness. At the same time, countless servants and workers sacrificed their own comfort and freedom simply to maintain the illusion of aristocratic perfection. As industry, reform, and modern ideas transformed England, the old world of inherited privilege slowly lost its power. The age of candlelit, ballrooms, and strict aristocratic dominance could not survive forever. Against the unstoppable changes reshaping society, what remained was history itself, a fascinating world filled with extraordinary beauty, enormous inequality, hidden scandals, and people desperately trying to protect their place in a rapidly changing nation. Today, Regency England is remembered as one of the most elegant periods in British history. Yet beyond the romance and luxury, it also serves as a reminder of how fragile power can truly be. Even the richest families, living inside the grandest mansions beneath the brightest chandeliers, could not stop time from moving forward. And eventually, their glittering world became only a story whispered through history.